buildings around this? I mean, shouldn't there be some standoff here?
Well, it's prime real estate.
Again, sanity and intelligence has very little to do with human behavior.
But you can understand why so many people want to live out there. I mean, you were out there for less than 19 days because of the train ride. But I'm going to guess that every day it was warm. It never really rained. There were no mosquitoes. I mean, it just the weather out there is just unbelievably good compared to here. I mean, I'm Midwest all my life, okay? I believe you two are also. But you can't compare the weather out there to here. Agreed?
Well, I would say that the main thing in your your list there was it never rains. I've often said it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there, and that's exactly the problem. Is there's not enough water for the number of people who want to live there.
You're absolutely right, but you can understand why someone would want to live there because you have the perfect weather. No humidity to speak of. It doesn't rain. I mean, everybody knows we need rain, but nobody likes it when it rains. It ruins the day. It messes up your hair. It makes your car dirty. Rain is a pain in the neck. It's necessary for life, but it's a pain in the neck. And for so many years out in La La Land, the land of make-believe, they've been successful in living in paradise without rain. And maybe now the chickens are coming home to roost. I don't know. We'll see.
They've been successful by stealing other people's water.
That's correct. And I think they're done being able to do that. So they're going to have a true reckoning unless they find a way to what is the word? If I say it wrong, you're going to correct me, Eugene. Desalinization?
That's right.
Thank you. But if they could figure an economic way to do that, that could be successful. But right now that's very expensive.
Well, one thing that I liked about that, and granted, I mean, living there and visiting are two different things, but I've never seen such a diversity of people just walking down the street together.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no, aspersions cast. There's no, what are they doing? It's like, it's definitely a mixing pot out there.
It is very much a melting pot. And they have their own little neighborhoods, but everybody seems to get along. They're the biggest melting pot that I've ever seen. There's Asians, there's Africans, there's Eastern Europeans, there's Latinos. You name it, they're there. Every race, sex, color, creed, national origin, sexual orientation, you name it, it's there.
While we were in the museum, they've got a part set apart to the folks that are actually, dissecting the bones and cleaning things and whatever. And there was a mom talking to her little girl who was probably about 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And she was explaining the science of what was going on. Mm-hmm. And I went over there and I says, well, that's all true, but you need to be aware of something else. And she says, what? And I said, these people get paid to get dirty. They get dirty all day long. And they do science, but they have to wash their hands when they get, it's like you go out in the backyard or whatever. And she says, her face just lit up. She says, you can get paid to get dirty? It's like, yeah.
You may have turned her on to the trade.
That's the important thing.
Sure.
But
So we're over an hour. I had no idea it was this long. Taking everything into consideration, the highlight of the trip, and we'll do ladies first. Joe. In other words, if you're going back, when I go back there next time, I need to do blank again because I liked it so much.
I need to go out to Joshua Tree for a much longer time and actually sit out there and draw.
Okay.
And because it's such an unusual landscape, I've never seen anything quite like it.
They've also got a road that's listed as the geology tour.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a chance to go on that? Just ran out of time.
No, and I would like to go back to Death Valley where I could spend 2 or 3 days in Death Valley.
I have spent collectively weeks in Death Valley, and I've not scratched the surface.
The one other thing I'd like to mention, and actually showed this to your wife earlier. See this?
Turquoise.
And what I'm looking at is a silver bracelet with a turquoise piece in it.
Yes.
If you take the train out there, they have a service stop in Albuquerque.
Okay.
Which is about 40 minutes long. And Native American, American Indians, people who make this stuff line the tracks to sell to the tourists.
Really?
And so you're getting good stuff. You're getting pretty much straight from people who are making it. The lady I bought this from, it's her brother that's the silversmith. And it's really good stuff. They don't tell you about that until you get there unless you've done this before.
Yeah.
But this time I came prepared.
Very good. Very good. Eugene.
Joe mentioned it, Death Valley, and it's not. I don't mean to disparage Joshua Tree. I had been there before, but I'd never been to Death Valley before, and I would like to learn a little bit more about the ecosystem there. I'm don't really know much other than what we saw there, and I won't mention it. There's a motel. There's a resort complex in there with a golf course.
In Death Valley.
In Death Valley.
That's Furnace Creek.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm just going, why is there a golf course in Death Valley? Isn't water shortage enough in here? And I'll admit I don't play golf. I have nothing against people who do play golf, but it just seems to me like there being too many people. This is that's a recreation that takes up a lot of resources that they don't have in the desert.
The restaurant at Furnace Creek is pretty good too.
I've gotten a Coke there before, but I've never eaten at the restaurant. Just across from that is where we rented a 4-wheel drive vehicles to go up into the mountains along to investigate some old mines that basically either a Jeep, motorcycle, or a mule is the only way you can get up there. You can walk if you want to, but it's 25 miles. You're not going to walk that in a day. But that was $350 a day to rent that vehicle. But I want to tell you, we went to some places that you could not get to otherwise, and we tore the wheels off that car. We went to I can't think of the name of it now. Name escapes me. It's where the rocks move across the playa.
Oh, yes.
Racetrack.
The racetrack. Thank you. I had a brain fart there. Yeah, the racetrack. We took that road down using that vehicle too, because it'll tear up the tires on your car, tore up the tires on the Jeep. But yeah, did you get a chance to go to the racetrack?
No.
Yeah, that's
another place.
There you go. The last time I was to the racetrack, though, I was so glad I had been earlier because some knothead had gone out on the playa with a car and just destroyed part of it. I was shocked.
That was one of the things that kind of annoyed me was the amount of ATV traffic in the desert.
Yeah, there's a lot of it there. But some places you can't go there with ATVs, but most places you can.
Do you know the mechanism for the rocks on the moving on the racetrack?
In theory, it's because they think the playa was wet, it froze, and the wind pushed them across the frozen mud.
You're close. There's a thin, shallow water, and the wind is pushing the ice flows, and the ice flows move the rock.
Okay.
And then during the quote wet and cold season, and then when it turns to the hot and dry season, all the water goes away, taking away the evidence, and you just have these rocks with these trails on them that, they moved.
Yeah. You think to yourself, how in God's name could this have happened?
But the wind isn't enough to push the rock, but if you get a big sheet of ice, it pushes the sheet of ice, and the sheet of ice
leaves the trail on the mud.
It pushes the rock.
Okay, that would make more sense. That would make more sense. So when's your next trip to the desert?
I don't know, 2 years maybe.
Very good.
We're guessing. Well, I think we're going to Northern California then, though.
That's another type of beauty. I will tell you, forget about the politics. Those people and their politics out there are it's just beyond the fray. But that California to me is beyond a shadow of a doubt the most beautiful state in the union. Of all the 50 states, California is the most beautiful. Just is, in my opinion. I don't hear anybody arguing with me, so I guess you're not going to disagree.
I kind of liked Hawaii. I'm kind of liking Arizona. The Grand Canyon has a very special place for me.
I agree. One of my goals in life is to take the hike down the Grand Canyon and spend the nights. I've
done 170 miles below the rim.
Nice. How was it?
That's another podcast. I've never done a rim to rim. That's on my bucket list, but I've always been there when the North Rim has been closed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Well, very good. Joe, Eugene, thank you so much for all your time. I appreciate you coming out and talking about your trips. A lot of people, I just want to close in saying, I have always said, do yourself a favor. Life is only so long. Life is short. There's so much out there to see. There's so much out there to do other than what's just in your backyard. Even if you're just going 100 miles from your home, go somewhere. Do something. Take the adventure of a lifetime. 3 times a year. I guess if maybe it's not the adventure of a lifetime if you do it 3 times a year, but you know what I'm saying. And you two are to be commended for taking a trip that long, that far, and on a train, for crying out loud, all the way out to California.
Yeah. I had a doctor's appointment the morning we left.
Yeah. And
the nurse there was and I said, we're going on the train. She says, I didn't think about that. My grandparents just had, my uncle died. They cannot fly and they cannot drive. I didn't even think about taking the train.
It's a very passive way to travel.
It's off so many people's radar screen. One time when I worked for the state parks, there was a conference in Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. I could take the train there, and it was literally blocks from the hotel. No. The state travel people weren't set up for that. You had to take a plane and rent a car.
Spend a lot more money and unnecessarily spent resources.
But it's just off people's radar screen, mm-hmm. and it really shouldn't be, but...
You're both to be commended. Welcome home. I'm glad you had a good time, and thank you for sharing your adventure on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for asking us to come out and talk about apparently one of the favorite places in the world to you.
Oh, yeah. When I heard you were going, I thought, I got to have these folks on to talk about it. Thank you again for coming. I appreciate it. That's it. We're done. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Go ahead and the best way to get the podcast is to go ahead and send me your email address. I then send it to you, the podcast, upon publications. You can download and listen to it at your leisure. However, I'm also on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Facebook, Twitter, TuneIn, Radio Online, the podcast app, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, CastBox, SoundCloud, Deezer, 2 more. I can't even think of the name of them because I didn't write them down. And, of course, at Spreaker.com. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.